Hello, everybody. Before we jump into today's episode, we have two sponsors we want to say thank you to for supporting this show. The first one is Routine. You guys have heard me talk about Routine, honestly, back from the early days of the podcast, and it's still a product I use every single morning. They have a prompt for me here. I'm going to do a little impromptu on this ad read today because honestly, this is a product that I truly believe in. And so I'm just going to tell you guys exactly what I think and why. First and foremost, this is a stat that they shared, but when you sleep, you lose between a pound and a pound and a half of water. And most of that's just sweating while you sleep. I used to not know if that was actually true, to be honest. I felt like a pound to a pound and a half of water seemed like quite a bit while I slept. But the one thing I did constantly pay attention to when I started using Routine was just the fact that before using Routine, I always felt a little dehydrated in the morning. And I'm one of those people that when I get up really early usually. I work out. One of the first things I do is some form of fitness. It's just like what I do before everyone's awake. And so it's very easy for me to grab a coffee, pre-workout, an energy drink, something with caffeine in it, and just go. When I am good about using Routine, first, I basically they come in these little single serve packets. They contain half an organic lemon, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, Himalayan sea salt, all 6 essential electrolytes, and they have no sugar in them at all. A lot of hydration products are going to have sugar. So one of the things about Routine that I love is that there's no sugar in there. So when I am good about doing this consistently, I will take one of those single serve packets, I'll throw it in my mixer bottle, and whether I also put in a pre-workout or something with caffeine or I just drink that separately, I try to drink that first. And the days I do that, I do genuinely feel hydrated and just have a different form of clarity all morning. A lot of people have tried to make their own homemade versions of Routine, right? You see people they take a shot of the apple cider vinegar, they put a little sea salt, a little lemon in a drink. This is essentially that, but in a product that you can take with you on the go, have it ready for you first thing in the morning. I know me personally, when I'm groggy rolling out of bed, the last thing I want to do is, squeeze a lemon, cut lemons up, go get the apple cider vinegar, find my sea salt. I just rip this packet open, throw it in my water, drink it, and it's good to go. You can try yours today. If you haven't tried it yet and you've been listening to this podcast for years, just try the damn Routine. Give it a shot. You can use code ShaneWhite30 and get 30% off your first order. So you get 30% off by using code ShaneWhite30 and go to yourroutine.com. To make it even easier, I've added the link to yourroutine.com in the show notes. So just click on the show notes for this episode, click on the link to yourroutine.com, and don't forget to use code ShaneWhite30. All right, guys, today's episode is also brought to you by NeuroRoast. Again, I'm going to go a little off script here. NeuroRoast is a product that I also came across during this year of 2023. They are a coffee company that's helping you optimize your brain function and overall well-being. This is another product that, to be honest with you, when I first started working with it, I was a little on the fence. I was like, do I really want to have mushrooms in my coffee? Well, folks, I will tell you, when I use NeuroRoast, one of the things that has stood out to me the most is I'll back up. People that know me know that I have way too much caffeine, typically. One of the things this year I've done a good job of is cutting out alcohol. Not completely, but predominantly, I don't touch a lot of alcohol anymore. What I think I've actually done the other way, though, is add a lot more caffeine. So I do definitely drink too much caffeine. That's something I need to work on next year, is just trying to minimize how much of that. But NeuroRoast is something that has actually helped me because of the way they've formulated their coffee. Like, unlike regular coffee, which is, still something I consume, but NeuroRoast specifically doesn't cause jitters or crashes. Mushroom coffee provides a more balanced and sustained energy, allowing you to stay focused and productive throughout the day. So the times I do use NeuroRoast, I'll be honest, I just don't feel that jittery, like, I'm jumping out of my chair or standing here at my desk jumping around feeling. So give NeuroRoast a try. They have some really good flavors. I'll be honest too, the two guys that started NeuroRoast are just really good dudes based out of New York, and they're hustling, and hopefully they can get some people to try NeuroRoast this holiday season by listening to this podcast. So for you folks who've been on the fence, I'm telling you, it tastes delicious. They've done a fantastic job of making this coffee not only be functional, but taste fantastic. And if you want to try NeuroRoast, you can use code ShaneWhite. So it's super simple, just ShaneWhite at checkout. you'll also get 30% off. So if you go to neuroroast.com, and once again, I have added that to the show notes. So just click into the show notes while you're listening to this episode. You can click on NeuroRoast link directly. Don't forget to use code just Shane White, and you'll get 30% off your order. Hope you guys love both these products. I'm trying to not only bring you guys products that I use, but that I believe in on the podcast. I'm not taking ad reads for any brands that I don't really believe in. So anyway, hope you guys love both those products, yourroutine.com and neuroroast.com. I've added those links to the show notes. Hope you guys love it. And I got an awesome guest coming up right after this. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Shane White Show. I'm pumped today to have both co-founders on the podcast today, which is a rare occurrence and something I love to do if I can pull it off. Can everyone listening give it up for the co-founders of SAUZ, Troy Bonde and Winston Alfieri? Boys, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, thank you. Forward to it. Happy to be here.
I have to, and I told you I would before, to everyone listening, the way this actually came to fruition. Me and Troy have been going back and forth on LinkedIn for a long time, and we were both at Expo West, literally in the men's restroom, washing my hands. I'm like, I know that guy. Walk outside, and as Troy walks out of the bathroom, I just attacked him and said, "Hey, I know you."
It scared me. It woke me up for Expo. I didn't need a morning coffee after that. It was just like
it was one of those, like, how do you approach someone as they're walking out of the bathroom and not make this awkward? And I'm sure I made it as awkward as possible.
It was like you'd done it before. You did a good job. And then Troy came back to the booth and was like, "Yeah, you know that guy that we supposed to do in this podcast? He's like, I just met him in the urinal."
That's hilarious. That look in Troy's eyes, I wish I could have recorded, because it was like you thought he was getting jumped or something.
I thought it was Carbone.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Well, anyway, so yeah, that was serendipitous in itself, and then pumped to get this on the book. So for everyone listening who doesn't know the brand, doesn't know both of you, would you guys mind giving just a little bit of an intro to you and the brand?
Yeah, of course. I will give you a little bit of background on the two of us. Winston and I grew up together in Pasadena. We went to high school together, went to college together. As sophomores at USC, we were sent home. COVID hit. We ended up sourcing a product from China that was a hand sanitizer dispenser with a built-in infrared thermometer. So you could take your temperature, it would display it, and you could sanitize your hands simultaneously.
Wow.
And the way it ties into the SAUZ story is we drove revenues in that business by direct outreach. We would email school administrators. We would draft emails all day. We'd send them out in the morning, and we would sleep in Winston's dad's office. And the business scaled quickly. We got really lucky. Timing was perfect for us in COVID. Scaled it to almost $1 million in 8 months.
Whoa! Wow.
We would sleep in this office. We didn't own the IP. It was a Chinese manufacturer's product, but there was a need for what we were selling, and we would sleep in this office. We would draft emails all night. We'd cook in the office, and we'd send them out in the morning. And pasta was kind of quick and cheap and easy. It was the go-to as we were working, and we'd go to Whole Foods in Pasadena. We'd walk, go up the escalator, walk by the beverage aisle to get to the pasta sauce aisle. And beverage was bright, and colorful, and trendy, and unique, and exciting. As two young consumers who knew nothing about the industry at the time, we were like inevitably attracted to the poppies and the Ollipops of the world, the way they looked, and also the flavor.
You just cut out for you.
You cut out for me. Yeah, shoot.
I'll finish off for Troy's.
All right, the baton.
We were attracted to walking into a Whole Foods like that and seeing everything that's bright and colorful, and elicited this emotional response to the consumers that Ollipop and Poppy would. But not even looking at beverage, but like every other category of food and beverage in general, like granola and Magic Spoon and cereal and anything. And we would walk into the pasta sauce aisle, and we'd look at the shelf, and we'd be like, why is like the only category of pasta, or only category of grocery in general, so archaic is pasta sauce? And we thought about it, and we're like, what is the reason for this? Like, obviously in the beginning, we're like, everything being authentic Italian, it means like it's very authentic to Italy. And we were like, there's nothing really bringing in a new younger consumer or anything differentiated in the category as well. You know, there's a lot of big brands out there that are selling essentially the same product. I like to look at it in a way as like when you go down the protein bar aisle, every protein bar is definitely very different. Like I buy protein bars because one has more protein, one has more fiber, one tastes better. This one's a puff crisp and this one's made out of, you know, just protein. But when you go in the pasta sauce aisle, it's like really there's premium and then there's non-premium. And the premium side of the category is really dominated by brands that either are New York Italian restaurants or piggybacking off of what Rao's is building. But there's nothing differentiating. Like if you blind tasted a lot of those brands on shelf, they would all taste the same. Whereas you try, you know, a marinara from, you know, Rao's or and then Carbone, like they're very essentially the same product.
Okay, sure.
When you go into the protein bar set, like IQ bar and RX bar are completely different products. Like you know from the beginning that like this is a different product, like tastes different, and those consumers like different stuff. But in the pasta sauce set, it's really different because everything is really the same. And it's like, why are consumers picking this brand over that brand when Whole Foods 365 is $3 to $4 and Rao's is $7? It's essentially the same product. You flip it around, ingredient decks are exactly the same, high quality ingredients, and there's really no differentiation in the set. So we looked at that and we deferred flavor too. We look at, oh, there's so many more marinaras. Like, how do these marinaras compete with each other? It's not texture, it's not different stuff, but like we thought about taste and innovating in a way that, you know, we could bring, like, our formulas aren't really that proprietary. Like it's a very unique product, but we're also adding like a little aspect to the product that is so differentiated to the consumer. That really changes the way of the brand.
That makes a ton of sense. It's funny. Do you guys know that I worked at RX Bar? I don't know if you knew that or not.
No, I didn't.
Okay. When you were saying that, I was like, I have no idea if he knows that or not. Yeah.
I love RX Bars.
I don't know if that's either one. I know I dropped off, but
Winston actually did a great job of just taking the baton and finishing your story there. No, you're good.
That's how we operate, I guess.
RX bars are like my favorite thing. Like I literally eat one every morning. So
okay, there you go.
That's why I said RX bar, because it's like,
no, I love that.
And I use that one the most because, you know, they have like the four main ingredients. Like that's like their biggest thing is like it's 2 dates, 14 peanuts or whatever, and then like whatever it is. It's like, I
love that you like know that. You know the number even. That's impressive.
I literally eat one every day. So like you know a different protein bar when you try one. That's like
well, no, I think it's really interesting. It's funny. I had a podcast a couple weeks ago. We were talking about this where the protein bar aisle is such a good example of like most brands at this point have tried to differentiate themselves in one way. Like there's just Whole Foods is a great example. I mean, when I go into my Whole Foods, it's just overwhelming with how many brands there are now. And we were talking about how few aisles are left where there can be true innovation like you guys are talking about. Like I was having trouble last time I was in just like a general conventional grocery store here in Chicago to like find very many aisles where I'm like, oh, there's still some opportunity here or here. Pasta was one that I did think about, honestly, before I even reached out to Troy. I was like, it does seem like a set that I just haven't seen. There's all of the better for you pastas coming out, but not the sauce, which is so interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And the better for you, like, our set is so unique in the sense that like there's really nothing you can do to really make a pasta sauce, you know, healthier for you. It's very clean ingredients. It's like
it's not like our consumer is not necessarily looking for like higher protein sauce, for example. Exactly. Is that really a thing?
I mean, I like Yo Mama's kind of promotes the keto friendly, but it's really not. Like essentially it's the same product, but there's really no differentiator. There's nothing you can really do to your product to make it, you know, you can make it less calories by using extra virgin to regular olive oil, or you can use avocado oil, for example. But that's not going to change the whole basis of the company.
Sure.
It's really a set that is not as unique as many others. And I think, you know, talking about the pasta sauce category in general is like, it took us so long to build and come out with our products that I think it's, you know, it's very monopolized set. Like it's really every brand in the category, like they really take up most of the set. And like even on the tomatoes side of things, like we had to like allocate tomatoes. It took us 2 years to try and like get a tomato crop PO.
Oh, wow.
which is crazy. Like the hardest part of building the business was obviously manufacturing. A lot of startups deal with stuff like that, but manufacturing on that side of it was definitely the most difficult, and having a supplier believe in you, and selling you these crops where like they would allocate that amount of tomatoes for Rayos and the big dogs.
Right.
So it's tough to get them to sell you product, but once you have proof of concept and you're continuously growing, you're locked in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. To back up a little bit, because I want to make sure we hit on it, what Troy was explaining, I think this is so interesting. So you guys fall into this category of people that I honestly didn't realize you guys were in college during COVID. So that I didn't realize you were that young. The wherewithal to take the time and energy that you got back to not just, I'm sure you played some video games, but, I always put people into two camps. Like COVID is such an interesting time where people either started things or they most likely people look back on that time frame and they're bummed they didn't try something because we were all just stuck at home for so long. Yeah. Is that just the type of guys that you both are, where you guys, the day you went home, you were like, shit, we should figure out a way to make money out of this?
Yeah, it was a little bit of that. I think also we knew we had to pivot out of what we were doing at the time, which brought us to CPG. But really the thought was, we're sitting at home, we have nothing to do, we're in remote class. To get back to class, we're going to have to, everyone was using sanitizer guns, everyone was, sanitizing hands, temperature guns, excuse me. And so it was like, why not put the two in one and see if we can, do some good in bringing students back to class, but also to make some money, of course. Like that's always any founders, I think, for the most part, who, especially young college founders, like we wanted to make some money, and that was the goal. It was funny. We didn't end up we drove the top line significantly. Our margins were thin. We didn't know how to operate a business at the time. Even little things, like we just weren't principled in the sense that we were importing from Shenzhen, China. And 6 months after driving $500,000 in sales, we received a tariff bill in the mail that we didn't know our product was applicable to. And it was like, okay, there goes 50 grand of our bottom line. So,
oh shit. Yeah.
I think it was more so a learning experience than anything. But we knew we had to pivot out, and the more research we did, the more we spent time in Whole Foods, the more we felt like the opportunity was in pasta sauce.
Like going off of what Troy said, like I was going into real estate, Troy was going into finance. Like it was, I think if COVID hadn't hit, our lives would be totally different. But
we had to tell our parents that rather than go into investment banking and rather than be a real estate developer, we were going to make tomato sauce.
Well, I was going to say, that's where I was going next, the timing so crazy.
It was a very difficult conversation to have. And I think whether it was, foresight or luck, it was a lot of luck, honestly. But timing has been great because the Rayos acquisition catalyzed the entire category. I think it's driven more eyeballs to the category than were before. And I think buyers are beginning to probably grow a little bit tired of like the old Italian restaurant brand trying to sell into grocery. Every review cycle, they're seeing a new New York restaurant, and not a knock against them. There's a lot of great brands in the category, but our level of innovation is just enough to be completely scalable, but also, more than enough to excite the consumer.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And so for you guys, I'm sure, and this is part of this beginning story that I'd love to get out in this podcast, is you guys, you have a business that's obviously generating revenue with the hand sanitizer product. As COVID's kind of calming down, there must have been a moment where it sounds like you had it, where you're like, okay, shit, this isn't going to last forever. This isn't like a business that can stay afloat for a long time. So did you guys was it almost immediate? Like, we're doing this, we're jumping to the sauce company? Or was it like, hey, we got to finish school. Do we really want to go into this industry? Like, it seems like there was a lot of options there for you.
Yeah, there were a few options. We thought about buying a couple of Airbnbs if we could. That was an early thought. And looking back, it would have been a great investment in 20. We thought about a handful of adjacent businesses, really mostly service-based. Like, we brainstormed a few service-based businesses. I don't think CPG was a thought until, one, we just fell in love with a lot of brands on shelf.
And we also fell in love with the idea of like having our own brand that is widely available, I think, like across the country. Like that's one thing that hits home. Like it's cool to be in a grocery store in LA, but like when you're in a grocery store traveling and you're in the other side of the country and you see your product, like
I
I
bet.
still get butterflies, and I'm like, this is like so awesome to see our product across the country in a store over here. And I think that's like something that really like motivated us. We're like, oh, that would be like super cool. And like, what if we had a brand that, you know, was widely available to everyone? So like owning something that was our own, I think would be like something that we really wanted to do. And we always laugh about it because like we are kind of like hustlers, and we were really hustlers in the beginning. Like the money started coming in, and then we're like, oh, what do we do? Like now we're founders. Like it's just like a lot more fun. So
I will say too, like shout out to the Truff guys. They influenced in a huge way.
Yeah, we were getting a lot of Truff ads.
We were getting Truff ads like, you know, all over the place. They had made 30 under 30 that year. Truff was blowing up. I think they were doing like 25 million D2C, and we loved their product. We loved the community behind their product, and we thought the founders were just like cool. Like we thought it was, there were a lot of parallels between, I think, them and us, and we looked up to them for a long time. And so I think that was a big influence. I remember we started formulating, and Truff didn't have a pasta sauce at the time. And about a month into formulation, Truff posted a teaser of like the top of a jar.
It's like we knew it was tomato sauce. We were like, a tomato sauce or salsa?
You gotta be kidding me. You gotta
like, shit.
They're launching a pasta sauce. But you know, I think we're complementary in the sense that we both drive a younger consumer to the category, and more 20 to 35 year olds in the category, the you know, higher velocity we turn. So we like those guys a lot. We've gotten to know them a little bit. They really, really influenced us.
That's really cool. Yeah. I mean, you guys, because you didn't have any CPG experience, right? You just, again, you said hustlers. That resonated with me, just imagining you guys. So like the first batch of tomato sauce, do you guys remember that? Like, I always love going back to that, like same as Peter and Jared making the first RX bar in their kitchen out here in Chicago. Like, do you guys still remember, like, where were you guys at? How did that go? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, it was crazy. The first time we held a jar, because it took us like 2.5 years from like concept to actually get a jar in hand. The first time we held a jar, I remember we picked it up and they had just cooked like our whole batch, and our co-man gave us like a few jars to take home. And I was like holding it in my hand, and we're sitting in Troy's car taking photos of it. And I'm like, this is insane, like to have it in my hand. And we look back at the photos, and like our labels were so wonky. like the product was just like looks so like bad compared to what it looks like now. Not in a bad way. Like the design, everything was the same or similar. We changed a lot of stuff from like our first run to like label material to a little bit of the label design, formula a little bit. So it was super cool though. Like I remember that day being like, you know, really exciting, amped up. But
I think it honestly speaks to, like, we could have pivoted into some random service-based business, but we wouldn't have the passion for it. Like, it sounds cheesy maybe and cliche, but like we're genuinely so passionate about what we do that like holding that first jar of SAUZ was a massive inflection point in our careers.
Well, I mean, I give you guys a lot of credit. I've been on both sides of that fence. Like, I work on the services side of things now, and when I was at our X Bar, and we talk about this a lot, with the CPG brand, what 99% of people see is all of the glam and like the wins. But holy shit, like when you make a food product and then you ship it around the country, and I'm sure for you guys, you know, it's a jarred product. Like, there are so many things that 99% of people that listen to this or that know CPG brands out there but don't work in CPG just don't know what you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of good and a lot of, it's tough. Yeah. It's a tough business.
Yeah, it's actually funny because when we were in college, I wouldn't say we got hate, but like we definitely knew that like a lot of our friends were like, these guys like stupid for starting like a tomato sauce brand.
Yeah. And now you're laughing though.
Today, like I got a call this morning from like a family friend. It's like, are you guys like, is this like what you're doing full time? I'm like, yeah, like we're running a business.
They're like, hey, Winston, aren't you supposed to be developing real estate? What are you doing?
Like literally. And I'm like, yeah, this is my full-time gig. Like you don't understand like the supply chain and everything else that just goes into building.
Sure.
I think
my girlfriend gives me crap when I'm like working on the weekends. I'm like, yeah, I'm working on it. Like I own a business. Like
It's your baby though.
my
Yeah.
life right now. Like we're working 24/7. Like this is part of what we do.
Yeah, I think too that like, we even at Expo, for example, we'd say, we're 9 months post launch and we're growing quickly. We've got a couple thousand doors in the pipeline for 24. And everyone's, how have you done it so quickly? The reality is we've been building for 3.5 years. Like all of this is like a culmination of much more than just 9 months post revenue. So you're right. I mean, everyone sees the glitz and the glamour. But we're a team of 3. It's Winston, it's me, and we have a head of brand, and we're grinding every single day, like day in and day out. So
I know that is actually really cool context for everyone listening, because you guys have a unique story where you didn't have CPG experience, but you had business building experience. And I think for people listening, a lot of the feedback I get is people that listen to this podcast, they have ideas. And I think the biggest gap that I always try to break down on here is what you guys went through, which is you have a concept and you just haven't taken the leap. And like, what's step one? So for you guys, and for all the people listening to the podcast today, what would you guys recommend? You guys say you went to Whole Foods, you recognized there was an opportunity, a white space that needed something new to come onto the space. What was like some of the first steps? Was it just creating a product? Like, I think where people get really hung up is like, how do I create this? How do I get packaging? How do I get a logo? Like just some of these basic business things. Do you guys have any recommendations for people who are listening today?
Yeah. I think for us, we began networking immediately. Like we dove in, we would cold outreach on email, on LinkedIn. Like we would try to be connected to anyone we felt might be able to help or provide insight and guidance. And that led to a connection to a food scientist. It led to a connection to a marketing team. It kind of, I think that the flywheel,
like a lawyer, like
a lawyer. Yeah. I mean, they kind of built this flywheel.
Yeah.
And I would say it really starts with networking. Like I look back and a founder, Angela Mavridis from Tribali Foods, I mean, she got us our first R&D team, our food scientist, who to this day is still our food scientist and has made every formula we have. So, and she did it because she was happy to help. I think, and that's why, as today, like Winston and I will get a LinkedIn DM once in a while from a young aspiring founder, and looking back, like that was us, and we're always happy to help too. I think you're right that like the leap can be intimidating, but you have to take the leap. Like Winston and I had 100 ideas. Like we had so many ideas of what to do, and it just became like, are we going to spend time thinking about more ideas and wasting time debating ideas, or are we going to pick one and run with it?
It's like 10% idea, 90% execution. Like
it's all execution.
You have to do it. If you don't take the leap, you really, not saying you never will, but it's just you live on the edge.
And I think your network becomes your most valuable asset early on.
Yeah.
It can be intimidating, but it's all very simple when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great advice. I think sometimes people underestimate the power of LinkedIn, Instagram, some of these platforms to even just like ask questions. I know even with this podcast, that's kind of how it got started. I just started messaging people I looked up to in the CPG space. To be honest, it was Instagram, LinkedIn, and it's crazy how many people will respond to you, will just answer a question, or just to your point, would love to hop on a call and help in any way that you can. So you guys, you figure that part out. You get a product, you get ready to sell. Again, another, I've lived through and seen what our X-Bar did. So I have like my own intuition. For you guys with SAUZ, then once you have a product, how did you guys then, I'm sure this comes down to networking as well. How did you figure out like, okay, this is where we're going to like focus our efforts and go sell the product? What do you guys remember back to the beginning of just deciding sales channels and figuring out where this is going to be sold?
Yeah. I mean, we were coming off the tail end of COVID. So we were like, okay, the initial idea was, we kept on getting ads for Truff, and we were like, whoa, this is cool. Like all these D2C brands or these food brands are really, hammering down on D2C and paid media and all this stuff. And we thought about it and we were like, when's the last time you got an ad for a pasta sauce? And like, if you think about it, like no one gets ads for pasta sauce. Like, you get ads for a lot of other CPG brands, but not pasta sauce. And like, it makes sense. We're a heavy glass jar. The unit economics aren't great, but that was the initial plan. And we were like, let's go heavy on D2C. And we were going to launch.
Totally wrong idea.
This was totally wrong, and totally not how we launched.
Have been more wrong.
Yeah,
because we launched and we actually had a lot of organic traffic at launch, and 60% of our jars that we sent out at launch broke.
Like bread.
Oh wow!
We had tested these boxes as much as we thought we needed to test them, and somehow in the U.S. mail system, they get hit harder than anything we could ever do ourselves.
I imagine you guys like throwing boxes in the air in the backyard.
Yeah, we have content of us just
literally throwing them against the walls, and it's hilarious.
I think as we really pivoted almost 180 immediately, we didn't waste time, we didn't pour more money in paid, and reverted to being a retail business. Meeting consumers in store, on shelf, winning at retail. And I think, again, it was fortunate that we moved as quickly as we did, because now we see a lot of these D2C darlings of COVID doing the exact same thing, pivoting out almost entirely from D2C and into retail. And the opportunity for us is at retail. It's on shelf, it's differentiating with brand, and it's retaining consumers with product. So looking back, I mean, even this year, I don't think we'll run one paid ad with the intent to drive
all of our it's just all organic.
Everything is organic D2C, and the remainder of paid media spend is with the intention to drive a consumer to a Whole Foods or or a Central.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a dumb question, but I'm just genuinely curious. Is there a reason that pasta sauce needs to be in a glass jar?
No, we've actually thought about packing in plastic. I think the reality is pouches are interesting. Our fear is if we have to really change a consumer's consumption habit, it becomes educational. And I think there are ways you can crush on packaging innovation like Graza has. And there are ways that you can take far too much risk when attempting to innovate on packaging. And for us, the risk outweighs the opportunity. A pouch would be really cool at scale. It wasn't something that we wanted to make a fundamental point of revenue generation for us early on. That to us was just, if it's not broken, we didn't want to fix it. And if it means that we can't be a D2C business, we're not a D2C brand then. That's kind of how we've looked at it. And maybe it's a little bit too, maybe it's risk averse, but,
No, I mean, it makes sense. You're innovating in a category that hasn't had a lot of innovation yet. If you innovate on what you're selling and the brand, and you're trying to do a different use case, I could see that being a lot. That'd be a lot for a consumer who sees the brand for the first time. It's just interesting because that's just such a what's the right word? That must just be for that category. That's just how everyone has always done it, type of thing. But it's wild to think that some of the big brands even haven't tried to. But again, I guess if they're mainly retail, there's probably not a good reason to innovate out of it either. So that makes sense.
We're thinking about it. We are. We have a friend, Chris Jane, who runs Proper Good.
Okay. Yeah.
He does a great job. It's pouched soup and pouched meals, mainly sells in Walmart, but he runs an incredible business. And, he was the one early on who said, you should at least think about it. So we're just, there's plenty of mediums for sauce. It's just, which do we feel we could effectively, convert the consumer's habits to, in a way that doesn't require tons of education. And that's just the fear.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. My brain's spinning because I'm trying to think if there's any CPG brands off the top of my head where I can think of they have like a retail package and then e-com package that's different, but they're like transparent about it. I can't think of any off the top of my head that does that.
And to spin up an entirely new supply chain for a separate channel, it's tough. It's just dangerous, it's
for
tough.
Sure. Yeah. Well, very interesting. I mean, I hats off to you guys for like how far you've come. And I know it's been years in the making, but again, being on the other side, and I obviously didn't start a brand like you guys have, just seeing like the good and the bad of what's come through it. It sounds like you've been very thoughtful throughout the process of just like where you go, how you go, and how you attack it. So hats off to you on that. It seems like you guys have figured out a lot in a short amount of time. For you guys, where you're at today, what has the other question that's an obvious one would just be like how you guys decided to put your efforts behind that. So, the same thing of like, where do you go? Who do you talk to? How would you guys recommend for people listening? And I'd be curious to know even a little bit about how you guys did it on just like funding the business, getting the business off the ground. Did you guys bootstrap it? Have you ever thought about raising capital? All those kind of fun things. And would love to just even hear just your thought process mentally of how you guys have thought about it, since those days in college.
Yeah, I would say we bootstrapped early on. Fortunately, our first investor introduced he was a real estate developer out of Orange County, and he introduced us to the team at Palm Tree Crew. I don't know if you know the Palm Tree Crew guys.
No, I saw Winston's hat. I was actually going to ask. I love the hat.
So the brand was incubated by Palm Tree Crew. They came in and invested early on, like in ideation. We had a jar of hot honey, and we sent it to them, and they loved it, and we got along as founders.
Very cool.
And so they really incubated and guided us. I mean, we owe them a ton of credit. I would say looking back too, we probably raised a little bit more than we needed to by virtue of us being first-time founders and being young.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of mistakes.
We made a lot of mistakes.
A lot of really mistakes that cost a ton of, it cost a ton of cash.
Yeah.
That was something we expected, honestly.
Mm-hmm. When you say that, Troy and Winston, do you guys mean like how much you thought you needed to raise was more than you thought?
Yeah, I would say like, okay, we had like this idea that we wanted to start, SAUZ, obviously, of course. And we're like, okay, let's go out and hire the top agency that will do our branding, and the top agency that'll do this, and the top agency that'll do marketing and all this stuff. And it really, we look back and we talk to other founders, and it's like, we see how many brands have just really bootstrapped. And I think, like, although we love how our brand turned out and we love everything about it, and we wouldn't take it back one bit, but there were just a lot of mistakes we made along the way that we probably didn't have to if we knew what we did 2 years into just meeting with founders and networking and stuff like that.
Yeah,
got it.
Okay. I think the interesting point is, like, we were almost spending more pre-launch building the business than we currently spend operating the business.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that was a huge mistake at the time, because again, like Winston said, we were paying the top agencies, and not that we like everyone we worked with, but looking back, we wouldn't go that route probably. It's worked out well, but I think it's required us to raise a little bit more capital than we'd like to. And at an early stage, like every founder knows, your equity is so valuable, and dilution always hurts. So I think, we kind of err on the side of bootstrapping as much as a founder physically can, without sacrificing growth and the viability of the business in doing so. We joke that,
we were also young too. Like we were 21 years old when we raised our first capital. So it's like, we look back at it now, we're still 24. And we have a long life ahead of us, and we live and learn, but that's just kind of how it went. But yeah, I would say, like, any advice is, you don't have to be as top notch. Like, you can definitely cut ways to launch your brand without having X amount of capital.
Yeah, every dollar matters. Like, every single dollar early on, especially pre-launch without revenues, matters. So
got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Something that piqued my interest when you guys said you switched to retail was one of the roles that I had at our X Bar outside of e-commerce was trade management. So I oversaw like all of revenue management for a time being. And so knowing what you guys are going through and just knowing what we were paying from gross to net, I'm sure that's a challenge that you guys deal with today, and just getting in. I mean, retail's it's expensive, but it works. How has that been going for you guys? And for people listening, what that just means is, it's not as simple as someone at a retailer is like, awesome, we want SAUZ, send us your products, we'll pay you for it, and it's on the shelf and you're good. There's fees to get on the shelf. There's things called slotting and different expectations around promotions and discounting. And so typically when you sell a product to a retailer, it's not necessarily, you're going to get some of that money withheld to pay for those things. So has that been a difficult journey for you guys at all?
Yeah, I think it's a steep learning curve for sure. it can be so foreign to anyone coming into the industry who hasn't prior. And like, we're first time CPG founders. So it was definitely a steep learning curve. I will say early data is showing us that I think product innovation and the way our brand speaks to the consumer bodes well for our capital efficiency in store.
Nice.
We're in a category that is dominated by trade. Like it is by virtue of everyone selling marinara and everyone selling arrabbiata and everyone selling pomodoro and nothing being highly differentiated, with Rayo's as the leader of the category. Everyone's kind of having to attempt to outspend Rayo's, and that's a kind of cannibalizing way to run a business. So what we're seeing is we're not playing that same game. We're actually kind of playing a fundamentally different game than most of the premium side of the category is. And by virtue of that, we're seeing much more organic acquisition and I think much stronger retention as well. So,
Okay.
we've been able to spend a lot less than we anticipated we would. It's, we still, of course,
Slotting is definitely, year one. Like we picked and choose our battles. Luckily, we've been fortunate enough to like have offers from a few stores that have said like, we'll let you guys in, but you have to pay X amount of dollars. And, after looking at, our route to market and what retailers we want to be in for our first year, we step back and we say like, do we really need that retailer right now? Like maybe we just focus on this one and next year they come to us and offer us half the price or we can negotiate some sort of deal next year. So a lot of that style, I mean, we're really picking and choosing, I think right now. We've been fortunate enough to not pay a huge dollar amount in slotting.
We try to take as principled an approach to door count as we can, in the sense that like we're more than happy to respectfully say no to a chain if slotting is outrageous at this stage, or if we feel like we can't go in there and drive velocities. Like we're building a data story continually. And if we don't feel confident in being able to meet our consumer in a store, let alone pay tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands in slotting, we're happy to respectfully say no. So I think that's another cautionary tale to young founders, is like revenue generation is so tempting and it's so great to see a big check from KeHE or UNFI hit your bank. But at the same time, like the way to win in this business is to drive velocity and to be productive in store, on shelf. And that's what we try to do. So yeah, Winston's right. We try to be as principled as we can on door count growth.
That's really smart. And what you just said there at the end, I think, is the key. Is it's great if you get on shelf, but the key is to get off the shelf.
Exactly.
Right. So I think sometimes that's
you need the reorders, not just the one order. So
yeah. And it sounds like you guys are doing that really well. Like you're focusing on where you're at and then getting it off shelf and reordering. And that's the key, right? It's always a sad story to me when I see brands go like really wide, really fast and don't realize how much that costs. And then you can't focus everywhere. And that can be a death spiral for sure. So for you guys, you've been in this now for a couple of years. We've talked through, how you brought the product to life. Now you're getting it on shelf. For you guys, what do you think the next 1 to 3 years? I know that's probably an impossible question to answer, but like you two as the founders, like where do you hope, if we had the same podcast in 2 or 3 years, where would you hope SAUZ would be? It could be door counts or just could be in general what you guys think the brand, from a brand awareness and what people think of the brand.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the long term, we feel like we can be a household staple. We're focused on pasta sauce. We're not really innovating cross-category yet. We have an exciting innovation pipeline of a few more SKUs in pasta sauce, honestly. I think door count is one thing. We want a massively engaged community. We want as many fans effectively of the brand as we can have. And I think as widely available in a meaningful way as we can be, we'd like to. So it's a tough question to answer, but we want to be this generation's Rayo's. We really do. And I don't think it's impossible. And we're biased because we're founders, but I think we can be the Rayo's of a new generation.
I love that. No, it's interesting. Before we record, I said this, where in my world, I see a lot of innovation around pasta, for example. I mean, you see a lot of brands that are trying to, low carb, high protein. You see a lot of that in the space. You guys, this is gonna be a horrible analogy, but I do see this as a huge win for you guys. I think of it as not directly the same thing, but directionally. When a new iPhone comes out, one thing that I always hear, I've heard people talk about this that doesn't always get a lot of light. Think about how much revenue is generated from the phone cases. Like these brands have something that you like 99% of people don't have there's not very many people that get a new phone, don't put a case on it. Well, those brands just like they innovate as that comes along. And for you guys, I mean, I remember when I first came across Troy on LinkedIn and looked at the product, I was like, damn, is all this innovation and competition and just like punching each other is happening with actual pasta? To have a young brand come in to innovate with sauce that works for all of them is for you guys, I actually see this as such a great idea because you can be friends with all those brands because you can partner with any of them or do anything you want because it'll work with all of them. I think that it's such a good, strong space, and love that you're in a category that it's just been overrun with big brands for so long that is such a fun place to be where you're kind of the young, exciting story that's coming in. And I'm sure you feel that. Do you guys feel that when you're in retail meetings? I'm sure they probably get a little bit excited to have you guys come talk to them.
We had a buyer meeting really quick where the buyer, this was a few weeks ago, had been there for like 28 years, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
And he said that, in all that he's reviewed in category reviews in pasta sauce, he said one, like Winston just echoed, and the other buyer had said they don't look forward to the pasta sauce review because it's always a new Italian pasta sauce that uses fresh tomatoes and fresh tomatoes.
Said, the freshest.
They use fresh tomatoes, fresh Italian tomatoes. And he said that in like 2 decades of reviewing the category, he'd never seen something as innovative as what we were doing. And this is a buyer in a Midwestern chain, a really large chain that,
wow.
He confidently felt, and this is kind of, again, goes back to the premise of the brand and strategically how we wanted to build. We didn't want to get caught in LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, Dallas.
Sure. Yeah.
This is a buyer who thinks our brand will resonate, and data is showing it is resonating with consumers in the Midwest and outside of natural and into conventional and into club and into mass. And we're not saying it in the sense that we want to make money in those stores. I say it because I think we can build community from, whether it's in the middle of the country or in a, Erewhon in LA. So it's been interesting on the innovation side.
That's a wild thing to call out. And this is so funny. I have a very quick aside. I'll tell you guys that, I guess this is like 235 episodes now of the podcast. And honestly, I don't think anyone's ever come out and said that before, which is wild to think. Like so many brands are focused on those areas that you just hit on. Yeah. And I'll never forget one of the last like in-person meetings before COVID, when we were at our X Bar, the CEO of Kellogg actually came in and wanted to like meet the team and we had this whole thing. And you guys can imagine, like our X Bar at the time, the average age was 26, 27. We had, at that point, it got up to 200 people, and it was very young though. And I'll never forget someone on one of the teams I worked really close with. He just asked very bold question, but he asked the CEO, Steve. He said, "Hey, just a question. Like, why is Kellogg not innovating? Like, how is our X Bar one of the only real like true innovative brands now within the whole company's portfolio? Like, it seems like we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting." Mm-hmm. And Steve kind of giggled, and he goes, I just want like, great question, but go to a Walmart in the middle of Nebraska, park your ass in that parking lot. And he goes, I can almost guarantee you that there will be 0 RX bars that walk out of the door. He goes, what's going to walk out of the door is cereal, Pop-Tarts, Cheez-Its. Exactly. And it just like, it hit me that like sometimes when we're like at Expo West, right? Like we are in this, this boiling pot of everyone kind of thinking the same thing, right? And we all come from, probably most of us coming from cities that are all kind of just focused in the exact same health manner, but that's not the majority, right? And so it was a wild answer to get back of his, Sure.
Yeah. Well, even I think the reality of when Winston and I were on shelf, when we'd like walk into a Whole Foods pre-launch, when we were just thinking about what to do and thinking about the pasta sauce category, like we didn't know what these New York restaurant brands were. I didn't know any of them. And we grew up in LA. Like in theory, we kind of grew up in a metro area, like not, so then for us, the thought was, if we don't know what this expensive New York restaurant brand is, why would the consumer in the Midwest or the South feel any sort of need if that is the value proposition? If the value proposition isn't, I make a more exciting sauce or I leave a lasting impression on the consumer, it's not that. It's you can have our quality of, our restaurant brand sauce in a jar. If the restaurant brand means nothing to the consumer, then what's the value proposition? That was kind of what initially catalyzed us to do what we did. We feel like product, experiential, memorable, and exciting product goes a lot further than, and again, not to knock them, but then a restaurant brand that most consumers will never even know. Or
that's such a good point.
know.
Yeah, because you think about, like, especially if it's like a New York City Italian restaurant, they just probably have this philosophy that everyone knows who they are and that everyone would love their sauce, right? And they launch a brand thinking that. That's a great insight.
Yeah.
I want to be conscious of your guys' time, and I always love to ask founders 2 questions at the end, so I want to make sure we save time for these. The first one is just source of knowledge. You guys have given some great ones today, and I feel like you really leaned into your network and trying to make sure people understand, like, that was a big piece of this, of getting off the ground. But if there's anything for you guys as you're kind of in just the heat of everything right now, building this brand, whether it's a podcast you've listened to, a book you've read, just like a source of knowledge as 2 co-founders in the CPG space that you would recommend to anyone listening to the podcast today.
Oh, that's tough. I think listening to your podcast with Kevin Lee was one of the most informative.
Oh, wow. Thanks. There you go.
I mean it. Kevin Lee,
Appreciate that.
Kevin Lee, Kevin Chan, those 2 guys, any podcast they ever do, we listen to. I don't know. I think Winston, I think you'd probably agree. It's a little bit spread across. I think we kind of learn as we go. I think it's like, I think the reality too, though, is like, there's no better way to learn than to do it. Like,
hell yeah,
do it. And we almost tranche it like in 2 buckets. Like, you got to jump in and do it to learn, but you have to have the right people around you to avoid the mistakes that you'll inevitably make. And those 2 things together, I think are really, really meaningful and valuable. Like, we don't sit down and study. We listen to Eric Skay at Carbone in every podcast we can. We like to listen to him because he, of course, knows exactly what he's doing, and there's nobody more knowledgeable on the category than him. We listen to the Kevin Lees of the world, and the podcasts that we can, we do, but nothing prepares you, better for the future than to just begin operating and to have somebody kind of guiding you or advising you. And it goes back to that network question, to avoid those mistakes. But there's no better way to learn than to jump in.
Love that. Yeah. At the end of the day, you can kind of overanalyze and get paralysis, right? So I couldn't agree more. That's a great piece of feedback. This one's my favorite question. If you listen to the Kevin podcast, he had a really good answer to this. But again, this is my favorite one because I'm a nerd when it comes to productivity, which sometimes is the paralysis thing that hits me. For both of you guys, like, what do you use, whether it's SAUZ or just personal goals? So it could be business goals, personal goals, but ultimately, like, what do you guys use from a tools perspective to plan out goals, and then all the way down to just getting shit done on a daily basis? Are you pen and paper? Do you guys use apps? Like, what do you guys surround yourselves with to just be productive and get shit done?
Yeah. I would say we're kind of in the process now of we're at this inflection point of going from startup mode to really structuring the business. We use Notion as an operating system, like I know a lot of founders do. We don't really have a massive tech stack. Again, we're a small, lean team. We have sales is contracted out, manufacturing is contracted. It's the 3 of us. We don't. I would say, like, we don't have some huge tech stack. We're not highly polished yet, even though we're working on it.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, that's really.
I was going to say that's an answer in itself, though, is having a good co-founder. I mean, I'm the same way with my business. Like, my co-founder and me, I mean, we're like yin and yang. So I get that. Like, if you have someone who, like, remembers things that the other one doesn't, and you guys remember the different priorities, that's a fine-tuned engine.
That is. And again, it has its faults. And we're working on it, but it's what's, clearly we're doing something right thus far. at scale, we're beginning to really structure the business in a more meaningful way. But we're kind of, we operate the way we have for the past, even the last business is kind of how we operated. We don't rely heavily on too much tech.
You know what? You guys probably don't give yourselves enough credit in this regard, to be honest. But, knowing you guys kind of grew up together, high school, college, you guys probably just have some like deep down understanding of how each other's brains work and what triggered, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I do think there's something to be said there too. Like I said, my business partner and I, we joined our X-Bar at the same time, sat next to each other through all those years, and now do our own business. And so it's when you're with somebody all the time for that long, you just inevitably, you guys create processes you probably don't even realize you have.
That's very true. I know how to piss Winnie off, I'll tell you.
Oh
that.
yeah, you gotta have that. You gotta be able to have like that plug you can pull whenever you need to.
No, but you're right. I think we work well together, and that's kind of what drives. That's the engine that drives the business. It's just, I think
1,000%.
So,
love that. You guys are great. So the last question, the most important for everyone listening today: what's the best way for anyone who's listening to this across the country to try SAUZ, to follow you guys, and ultimately follow the brand?
Okay, we have to say really quick, Whole Foods SoPac, we just launched. Where we want to unlock a few more regions of Whole Foods. If you're in Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, or Hawaii, please go to Whole Foods.
Love that.
Otherwise, we do ship D2C. I know we mentioned the early on glass breakage. No more breakage. So
fix that. Okay, good. Sweet. Love it.
Yeah.
Anywhere in Chicago? Are you guys anywhere in retailers in Chicago?
Foxtrot. I think only Foxtrot.
Foxtrot? Okay.
Maybe some independent too.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
But Foxtrot's great. We like them.
Well, excited to hear the big news too. I'll have to repost this when the big news drops that you guys can't share yet, but excited to hear that when it's live.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome, guys.
Thank you. I mean it.
Yeah, no, guys, it was seriously a pleasure to meet you. Glad we could make it happen. And I can't wait to, stay in touch, and we'll have to do this again in a couple of years when you guys are nationwide everywhere and Rayos is like bowing down.
Good chat.
All right, guys. Awesome.
Have a good weekend.
Talk to you soon. Yeah, you too. Appreciate it, guys. All right. See ya.